Okay, today we're going to review Chapter 6, Terrorism. Um, this chapter, obviously, we cover terrorism with hazardous materials because of the nature of the chemicals that are used for weapons of mass destruction and the broad concept of what is hazardous materials. WMD falls within that category, so it's covered in the text. So there are definitely some questions you're going to get. Obviously, you got the quiz, but the midterm as well will have a few questions regarding this chapter, so we're going to cover some of the important information. All right, first off, one of the key concepts to understand when we're talking about terrorism is secondary devices. Okay, and those are devices that are designed for first responders as the targets. So those are devices that are used to draw us in and then cause damage to first responders. The idea being that there's a very small number of trained emergency personnel, and that if terrorists can address those individuals, then chaos will ensue and more people will end up being injured. They won't be able to seek treatment, and they'll end up with a larger kill percentage. So we always need to be aware of those, particularly in certain situations, such as explosions or shootings or anything violence in nature that could be used to draw us in. One of the things that you definitely need to know is the difference between classifications. Okay, we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about symbolic, civilian, eco-terrorism, agro-terrorism, cyber-terrorism. You should be able to get the question based off the name alone. But certainly infrastructure, that's a lot of things that we strike as military. We're looking at bridges, tunnels, communications. As far as terrorist incidents around the globe, oftentimes they go for symbolic or civilian targets. Those would be like embassies would be obviously a symbolic target. Something like the World Trade Center was kind of both. It was a symbol of American power as well as a civilian target, housing some 50,000 workers a day. And then, of course, the civilian targets, those are the ones that you hear about all the time. Markets, nightclubs, all that kind of stuff. So those are important. You need to understand what those are. They do talk about some different weapons, particularly one, a pipe bomb, very common, easy to use. One thing to remember about explosives when you're dealing with hazardous materials as a first responder is don't touch them. That's the rule. Don't mess with it. Okay? Don't pick it up. Don't move it. Don't kick it. Don't leave it alone. That's basically it. We'll call in EOD to deal with that when I'm messing with any of that. Okay? So leave them alone. Chemical agents that are covered, it definitely does start to cover some different types of chemicals. You're looking at nerve agents like Solman and VX. These are very common military grade weapons, not common out in the street, common within the military. We don't run into this type of stuff hardly ever. There are some things that are easier to create and manufacture out in the world. Something like cyanide, chlorine gas, hydrogen sulfide, where you can make access to these chemicals through manufacturing and stuff like that, and then they can use that for us. But these nerve agents that they talk about are incredibly powerful. Started being developed in World War II or World War I with mustard gas, and grew from there. Incredibly powerful. Few drops is all it takes to kill, and it's really about weaponizing and aerosolizing them. So you look at something like the Tokyo incident in the late 90s where they used sarin, and they killed a dozen people, but if they were able to aerosolize it appropriately, they could easily killed 100 times or 1,000 times that many people. So it's pretty interesting. Blistering agents, there's some good pictures in the book. Mustard gas, one of the originals, that was like for trench warfare because it was heavier than air. So they would lob it in on artillery, and then it would settle down in the trenches where all the people were fighting, and then cause all kinds of problems for the other countries that were there fighting. Blood agents, something like cyanide is considered a blood agent. That's what we use in the, like, for the gas chamber. It basically binds with red blood cells so that oxygen can't bind. So your lungs are filled with oxygen, but your blood's not carrying any of it, so you basically suffocate even though you're able to breathe air. Okay? Let's talk about some things like anthrax, plague. These are naturally occurring. Now, you can create these things. Plague, obviously, lives on rodents. Anthrax can be created from plants. Smallpox. You know, a lot of these things that were that killed millions of people throughout man's history are still around, and there's a reason why they're still around, and that's because we keep them around as a potential to be used for, you know, chemical or biological weapons of our own. We also start talking about radiation in this chapter. It's important that you know the difference, alpha, beta, gamma, of course. Time distance shielding, that's critical that you understand that. Know the difference between them. Okay. Talks a little bit about decon, mass casualty. It does also talk about the coded threat level. You shouldn't get any questions about that. So just focus on the different types of WMD. Symptoms like sludge for nerve gas. Focus on the types of targets, and you should do well. All right, good luck on the quiz.